right, hey there, friends, or as the elves would say, sweet-eyed melon. It is Super Dave at Prog Words bringing you another no BS reaction. Time to discover something new once again. So this time around, I am checking out something entirely new to me. Well, as I always check out something entirely new, but the band is also entirely new to me. Somebody that has escaped my notice for over 20 years, and that band has the rather unusual name of Sleepytime Gorilla Museum. And the song is Salamander in Two Worlds, which comes from their latest release, which is entitled Of the Last Human Being. So, now these guys, believe it or not, got back together back in 1999. They released 3 albums between 2001 and 2007 before, I don't know, taking a really long hiatus, breaking up. I'm not clear exactly what happened, and it doesn't matter, because what happened was they reformed last year and now have come out with this brand new release that just came out this year. Don't know where they've been, that I've missed them all that time. Granted, 2007 to 2023, 16-year hiatus. I guess it's easy to miss if you didn't pick them up in the first half of the aughts. So anyway, I don't normally, as you know, react to brand new music. Mostly because that's akin to doing a review, and I, as you know or may not know, I tend to hesitate doing reviews. One, because I don't know that I'm going to be able to do them as well as some of those out there I see doing them, so I don't need to add to that noise. Number 2, I like doing interviews, and if I'm doing reviews, then I take the chance that I might perhaps sully the soil, muddy the waters of somebody I want to interview by not liking their album that much. Or whatever, I just don't want it to get in the way. So I don't normally do that because I just don't want to mess with the chance of doing reviews with notable and significant artists. That being said, having found out that this is a band that's been around 20 plus years, whose name I've never heard, and honestly might fit into a similar wheelhouse as Cardiacs and Mr. Bungle, both of whom I've recently discovered and been enjoying, figured it was worth a listen. Why not check it out? They can maybe fit into the same kind of category as those other bands in the sense that their influences and styles are massively eclectic, all over the place. They apparently do some wacky things live and just are exceedingly avant-garde and stretching the boundaries, which is what we like to do with the progressive rock angle of things. So, also interesting to note here, I learned that progressive icon Tony Levin, bassist extraordinaire, stickmaster, is a huge fan of these guys. So that also intrigued me. So I figured, let's take a look. Let's take a listen. So before we start the music, just want to remind you, please don't forget, take a moment, like and subscribe. Check out my social media. The links are below. The link is also there for my Live 365 station, The Expanse, which is all progressive rock and metal all day, including Sundays being dedicated to 60s and 70s classic progressive rock. That's called the Brain Salad Sunday. Check it out. You might enjoy it. So, without further ado, here is Sleepytime Gorilla Museum with the song Salamander in Two Worlds. Buckle up.
Open your
I will say this is incredibly unexpected. I expected something, at least that might have been more in the rock genre. That's the impression I had, given, the appellation of progressive rock, or at least they've come up in progressive circles. I'm a little uncertain how to describe this at this moment. Lots of orchestral elements, really, when you get down to it. There's nothing rock going on here. There's no rock and roll happening here. This is very orchestral, an interesting blend of instruments, picking out things like a trumpet, and I do hear some bass, whether it's stand-up bass or bass guitar, probably doesn't matter. Xylophone, I think, flute and or piccolo, some, high-pitched woodwind, fluty type instrument. And very, I'd say in many ways, cinematic. Mostly because I get the impression, one, it is not constructed anywhere close to what one would call a typical rock or pop type of breakdown in sections. This is so far in my mind, quite freeform. As a matter of fact, I'm not quite sure I'm picking up much of anything that would be a repeated section. It's, to at least this point in my head, got a bit of a train of thought kind of feeling to it. And it's very interesting. There's strings in there. There's other stuff. It's just, again, this is, I don't know, really. This is, to me, uncategorizable at this moment. Avant-garde rock being one of the terms I've heard thrown around. Okay, the connection to rock at this moment is not clear. Now, maybe at some point in time there's going to be a transition to something that resembles rock, and then I will recognize the connection. And this is possibly an extended intro on a 6.5-minute song. Yeah, I've seen intros run for 1.5, 2 minutes. We're at 2.5. See, the vocal, I don't quite want to call them harmonies, but the blending vocals are very intriguing and interesting. Someone at one point in time there sounded like super low bass, unless that's just the tone I was hearing at the moment, or the sound. So I was listening for it again. Primarily, I hear the female vocal being more front and center, but it's not that far out that the others disappear. They are still there, and it's very much a blend of the vocals. I don't have lyrics in front of me, which is fine because there's too much to absorb, but I don't think I could listen to this at the same time. But wow. Okay. Definitely not quite what I was expecting. Matter of fact, a little bit further out than I expected. I'll be curious to see where this goes. I wonder if there's going to be a big emotional crescendo, or we'll keep this kind of low-key, slightly tense tone going with it. It's very much an unresolved kind of flow of chords. So, building tension. We'll see. Maybe that crescendos at some point. Be curious. All right, let's continue.
Salamander and from poison, alive in the arms of death, last of the salamanders, child of the first breath, storm from poison, alive in the arms of death, last of the salamanders, child of the first salamander into words, water and fire. Salamander into words, water and
Wow. Okay. Well, as far as the question about whether or not they were eventually going to add some rock elements and there will be an emotional crescendo, consider that question answered. Obviously, they got to that. Almost like they knew I was going to ask, like it was expected. That was probably close to the only thing that I would consider expected in this song, was the fact that I did have a sense they were building towards some sort of, grand crescendo of some sort, which they clearly did. Bordered on at times on metal, with, in my mind, almost like a less distorted death metal vibe. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody on the planet right about now but me, but that's in a certain sense. Like if they turned off the distortion and didn't quite sing with harsh vocals, that could have been some sort of death metal song or something like that, or something, I may be misusing the term death metal here, forgive me on that, but just in that sense, that maybe kind of a black metal, symphonic black metal, I don't know. Somebody somewhere threw out the correct term there, well, that'd be cool. Nonetheless, it had a metal feel to it. The way that they were playing the chords, the way the drums were being played, the way he was singing. Granted, there was a bit of a chanting kind of feel to it at times as well. Like, I almost feel like you could have stuck that over a scene from The Omen, because it had this feeling of like cultists chanting a little bit. You're being chased by the cultists and running down the hall, and the guy's going to catch up with you and stick his hand in and pull your heart out. Whatever. But what an interesting song. That was quite fascinating in the construction. And again, very cinematic, because again, even that first half compared to that second half, the first half very orchestral in nature in the terms of the instruments and the way they were playing. The second half much more very aggressive, very chaotic, very choppy, like an action scene or a frightening scene in a thriller. And again, that second half took over a different kind of direction in the cinematic approach. So these guys are definitely a thing all of their own. And I interestingly enough, with the name and the reputation and the things that I read about them doing, now, I don't know what the lyrics were saying, I really didn't follow, but I was expecting something a little more intentionally silly or over the top or satirical, like Cardiacs or Mr. Bungle, where there was going to be a certain level of silliness to them. That didn't feel silly at all. That felt dead serious. And clearly, showed off some of their musical chops that, again, would have been very handy in a heavy metal song of some sort. Pick your genre. Somebody somewhere will have probably a better label than I did. So definitely interesting. They have me curious because I want to see, do most of their songs combine this kind of orchestral cinematic feel? Or is that this song? Is that this album? So I am intrigued enough to dig further into what they're doing to see what else goes on. I didn't feel so terribly like there was some jazz elements, and I'm certain jazz is part of their repertoire and their influences and their eclecticism. Depends on how you want to look at it. I've certainly, if you want to go check out a band called, let's see if I get the name right exactly. It's either, I think it's NYC Chilharmonic or New York Chilharmonic. I think if you search Chilharmonic, you'll get it. It is black death metal jazz. I could see the roots connecting both of these guys with that in many ways, but that is a thing unto itself. I have heard. I have not reacted in video, but I've heard. And wow. Anyway, back from my tangent. So this is definitely interesting. I don't know that I could ever see this being the kind of thing that, you're going to put the top down of the car, roll down the windows, and crank while you're driving down the street. But I do have to wonder if this would be one of those bands, or at the very least one of these songs, that listening to an album as a whole gives one the best experience rather than taking songs here and there. Granted, a quick scan of their catalog and the song list, track listing on this album suggests to me that most of their songs fit in a fairly typical song length of 4 to 6 minutes. I don't think I saw anything that was epic length or anything like that. So I'm curious. I'm kind of curious how this piece fits into the bigger puzzle. So I can expect I will be returning to these guys. But again, playlist worthy could be rough. But I could certainly speculate that there may be one of these examples of an album that, listened to as a whole, rewards the listener for the whole thing together, and it's not really meant to be broken down into singles, although they did release 3 singles before the album. So I don't know. These guys strike me as very unpredictable, so they may do all kinds of things that you wouldn't expect even when you're busy trying to expect the unexpected with them. I don't know. I'm curious what the rest of you think. How many of you guys were already familiar with these dudes? I'm wondering if there's this hidden fan base out there like Cardiacs and Mr. Bungle that I am suddenly going to become familiar with and find out they've all been out there and have known about this well before I have. So let me know your thoughts. What did you think of this? First time hearing something like this? Are you a long-term fan of these guys? I'm curious what your reactions will be comparing what this is to what's come before. It wouldn't surprise me if this is a band every single album sounds completely different than the other, and so it's hard to compare them album to album. We're going to find out. I am going to dig into this a little bit, which means I probably will do what I do with other bands and go back to the beginning and go through it chronologically just to see what I see, just to find out. So let me know. Drop some comments in the comments section. Fill me in on the things I got wrong or the parts I haven't figured out. Be very curious to know what you guys know. And once again, thank you for watching. I appreciate your time, for coming along in this little adventure with me. Very cool. That's all I have for you today. So, the usual reminders. Never fear to deviate from the norm. These guys sure as hell didn't. Keep it proggy. And this is Super Dave, signing off.